Welcome to Cast of Creators. We're your hosts. I'm Nelson Thal.
And I'm Casey Stewart. We've spent our careers in media and publishing, and now we're setting the stage for creative people who inspire us to share their stories.
Cast of Creators is presented by our new social browser called Hover.
Hover makes browsing fun. You can follow people and your favorite sites to discover and discuss the web all in one place. Download Hover, that's HVR, in the App Store or Play Store.
Our guest today is Chen. She's a TV and radio host, writer and producer, and you may recognize her as an on-air expert or from the Great Canadian Baking Show.
We talked about Pei's career in media, dealing with imposter syndrome, how to make more money as a freelancer, and of course, food.
Pei, welcome to Cast of Creators.
Hey, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Awesome to have you here. I've obviously heard so many good things about you from Talia.
I know.
And we are all incredibly passionate about cooking.
Yeah.
So I love to cook.
I know you do. I'm very aware of this.
Obviously, we know you love to cook and bake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't bake as much as I cook.
I like to bake.
Oh, you bake?
Yeah, I love to bake.
Yeah, I'm more of a baker than a cook. Like, I cook because I have to feed myself.
Yes.
And I enjoy cooking, but like baking is very much my that's when I'm the most stressed is probably when I'm baking the most.
Yeah,
which is like a little counterintuitive. But it's my way of kind of relaxing in a way.
Yeah, that's exactly
what I said. I said, I don't post about I post about life and things that sort, but I never share my cooking, or very rarely I'll post, I made another pavlova. That's my favorite thing to bake.
Nice.
My family's from New Zealand, so that is like a recipe passed down from my family. But I mean, I find cooking so relaxing, and baking the same thing. It just gives me joy,
Did your parents cook? How'd you get into cooking?
It wasn't because of my parents. Like, my mom never taught me to cook or anything like that. But my parents have always been in the food business. Like, they they retired last year. They were a COVID casualty, truthfully. Mm-hmm. So they had a stall at the farmers market there. But they'd been in business for over 35 years.
Wow.
So COVID
Selling
really, like a little bit of everything. Like my dad's first business in the 80s was he was making and selling tofu, and we were living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So they immigrated from Taiwan, and my parents, they didn't have money, they didn't have a lot of education, they didn't speak the language, they spoke very broken English. So that's why a lot of immigrants end up kind of cobbling together a business for themselves or employing themselves in some way, because how else are you going to put food on the table? My dad is not necessarily the best businessman, and my mom would always say that, you have to have a sense of making money, I think, to be successful at business. You can be passionate about whatever it is, but you do have to have a focus of okay, but this has to be worth the time. How do I monetize this even, marginally? So, and they had a stall in a food court when I was very young. That was their first business. And it was Chinese food, which I use air quotes for, which is Canadian Chinese food, right. Chop suey food. And, I actually wrote some stories about them because when they closed, they had been known in the community for so long that they had such a turnout of longtime customers over the decades. So again, we're going back they've been doing this for over 35 years.
Wow.
And, they sold food at the farmer's market. They were very, they hustled. They worked every day of the week. They worked, I could hear my parents getting up at 3 and 4 in the morning to start work, into the evening. And it was just that's just what they did, right? It wasn't because they had this, love and passion for making, food that people expect to be cheap and that you sold at a reasonable price. I think we romanticize immigrant stories sometimes because we think they came out on the other end with this beautiful story, and look, they touched people's lives and they made these friends, and maybe they changed the community or impacted it. And yes, that's great, but there's a lot of hardship. Those years are not easy.
Yeah, they're grinding.
Yeah, and it was like it's a challenge for them. Like I remember, like when we were younger, we didn't have money. Like it was just. But when you grow up in an area where everyone's kind of like you don't really notice, right? Like, and we didn't have the internet, so we didn't know. We didn't know to want things,
right?
That we didn't know about.
Yeah, you didn't
right?
know
Like we didn't
there.
know these things. I mean, I wanted a Barbie camper trailer, but that wasn't going to happen.
I never got one either.
Yeah, there was like all these things. I had like the knockoff Cabbage Patch Kids for a while too. The knockoff Barbies.
I had a knockoff Barbie Ferrari, but
it's just like and like, and it's probably like a really great innocent time to grow up and be a kid, to be honest. But actually, like the CBC in Halifax has done a couple of stories on my parents through the decades. So if anybody wanted to look it up, they could.
Yes, I've loved following. I feel like I kind of know your parents, and I know a lot of people feel that way. Like seeing your posts about them, even your niece. I watched.
She's
I don't know
now.
her.
She's 7.
I watched her when she was really young. It's like I've seen so much of your family.
You know what? It's so funny because sometimes I run into people that I don't know in real life. Like, there's so many people you just kind of know online or maybe create an online friendship with. And I will say that my parents and my niece, they're the most popular people on my Instagram. Like, it's not even about me. It's not even me at all. People will be like, I love your parents. Like, yeah, well, they're a trip.
I read the caption where you go, if you like them so much, you can take them. For a
yeah. They're like, I want to travel with your parents. I'm like, you can
book the tickets. They're all yours.
Yeah, they're all yours. You just tell me how long they can stay. Like that's,
yeah.
But yeah, so it's so funny when you say that because it's true. Like there's a group of people who just like really do love my parents, love my niece, and I think there's a relatability, to them. Like no matter what your background or culture is, you can kind of relate to like aging parents and them as grandparents and the kids and stuff.
With the iPad or your mom's doing stuff with the iPad.
They're just like so technically challenged. But I also think like that's what people relate. Like people in our kind of like whether
you can see your own parents
generation.
Yeah.
You can understand. You can relate to like, your parent calling you and not understanding how to connect to Wi-Fi. Or like how to take a photo properly.
Frustrating it is.
They have like, a bad angle.
Yeah. How to FaceTime. And now I'm like, Mom, I'm just seeing the ceiling. And she's like, can you see them? Like, I absolutely cannot see it. Like, it's actually impossible when the camera's facing the wrong way. Right. Like... So, all of that. But anyway, that was like a long roundabout way.
So they were in the consumer packaged goods business.
No, not packaged. So it was just like fast food.
Okay,
like takeout.
So they were, but when you said tofu.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So tofu, not packaged because it was fresh. So it was a very small. My dad. It was a bad idea. It was truly a bad idea.
Fresh tofu.
Yes, and it was like if you the words you would use now are like artisan, handmade, like all of that. But it was he would sell it to like health food stores, but like it was the kind of health food, where you just serve yourself, right?
Right.
So that sort of deal, or like some Chinese restaurants. But it would be sold like in bulk, like in a tub of like a dozen pieces or something.
Okay, got it. And you watched him just get the raw materials though and process it and make big batches of this stuff?
Well, they made it in the house, which is illegal. But it's like, so I mean, I can say that now. And I mean, I'm sure there's regulations about commercial kitchens and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, there are now. That was back then.
But it also was like, he wasn't, I mean, I don't know the rules around it, but you're selling it to like really small like businesses essentially. So I mean, we not like we could hang out there. We weren't allowed in there, right? Because I was like, that's for like making food or whatever. Like we had a separate kitchen. So, but I mean, it was a slog. It's very physically demanding, and it's a lot of labor. And then you get, it's a lot it's a lot of investment. And then, things change, like the industry changes, right? So suddenly tofu becomes more mainstream, and suddenly it's in the grocery stores and you can buy it for $2 a package.
Right.
And suddenly you can't justify
tofu.
that, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't compete,
no.
Right? So it's the same as like you can go to the grocery store and you can buy a loaf of bread for $3. And then someone who's maybe making their own sourdough and fermenting their starter and all of that is trying to sell it for $9. And so when people are like, well, why would I pay? It's like, you're paying for time, ingredients, quality. And in some cases, in some food products, people will and in others they won't.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah.
And so this is when you're still out east.
Yes. Yeah. That's where I grew up. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in originally Halifax?
Halifax, and they moved to Sackville, like a more of a suburb outside of the city. And it was a town called Beaverbank. So it was very small. We were the only Asian family. So.
Oh, wow.
And then they moved to Nova Scotia. Was that where Sackville is?
Sackville's in Nova Scotia.
Nova
Yes.
Scotia.
Yeah.
I need to go there.
I've never been to Nova
I've
Scotia.
never been
Nova
either.
Scotia is beautiful. Like summer is truly stunning there. You can make it your trip next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Been to PEI.
my mom sailed there this summer.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so they left just before the most recent storm, but they're on their way to the Bahamas, and they spent some time. She's been sailing since July.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
They'll get to the Bahamas in January.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's a long time to be on the water.
Yeah,
Like, as someone who gets motion sick, I'm like, that's a very long time.
yeah. So
They left from Georgian Bay.
Yeah, they left from Georgian Bay and sailed right out to the East Coast and stayed there for a little while in a bunch of different small inlets and stuff. And they're right now on their way to New York, and there's 5 other Canadian boats just waiting for a certain tide to change so that they.
That's very cool.
Yeah, she's cool, my mom.
Yeah. Then you came here for university?
Yes. Yeah.
And
So-
what did you do in your broadcast?
Yeah. I took radio and television arts at what is now called Toronto Metropolitan University.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so you knew you wanted to go in TV already.
I don't know that I knew that. Like, I think I was in my last year of high school and I was very sheltered, and this is pre-internet days. Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let's just state that.
We'll just throw back.
And it was like, well, what do I know? I lived in a small town. I was very sheltered. I liked writing, but I didn't really see, I'm like, well, how am I going to be a writer? Like, I just didn't know. And, I had a teacher who was actually my math teacher who was like, there's this university in Toronto where you can learn about television. It's like, wow, I never thought that was even a thing, that you could go and study and go and learn about. So I applied kind of on a whim. I barely made the deadline, basically. And I'd never thought I would leave Nova Scotia. I actually thought I was planning to go to Dalhousie. I'd already accepted, it was just, I was going to stay close to home. I was very much happy to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't have ambitions of going to a big city or doing any of that, but I just didn't really know what I was going to do or I don't even know that I knew what my interests were, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was 17. And
What do you know then?
yeah, and I knew, as much as my parents would have loved if I got into science, I just didn't. I wasn't naturally adept at that either. It wasn't oh, I'm really brilliantly smart. I was blessed with a great short-term memory, which is how
that's
I
helpful.
aced school. Right, I did very well in school, but again, I could just regurgitate.
Yeah.
Did I absorb it?
You're like, no.
What was I talking about? I don't know. So I went to Toronto Metropolitan University, and I went in for writing. I wanted to write. So that was my essay and all of that when I went in.
Had you been to Toronto at that point? Or so this was your first trip to Toronto?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, that's wild.
So I really hated it. I was miserable. I lived in residence my first year. This was also when Ontario had grade 13. You guys had an extra year of school.
Yeah.
So
And
everybody was older than you.
Everybody was older than me. Everybody was of legal drinking age. And I had just turned 18 because my birthday's in August. So I was always youngest of my friends.
Yeah.
Last to get the driver's license, last to, turn 19 and be able to drink, all of that. So I just turned 18 and moved to Toronto.
Wow. So technically you could have taken a year off and not been behind.
Yeah, I know. Yes. Yeah, in a way.
Wow.
But then everybody was 19 and ready to party and live it up. And in the end, it was probably better for me that I couldn't, to be honest.
Did you get a good roommate or bad roommate?
I lived in residence. We had our own rooms,
Oh, yeah,
but a
room.
shared
Shared bathroom?
exactly.
Yeah,
But everybody had their
common area or
own
whatever.
shared tiny little room with a little twin bed. But school, the program was great. Some of my best friends now are from the
that's
kids I
so
went to school
nice.
with in the 90s, right?
Yeah, that's so nice.
So they're some of my closest friends. A lot of them do, really well. So it's nice to see them succeed in the industry.
Mm.
And I always thought I would go home afterwards. I was just I didn't have big ambitions of big city life.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do creative things, but I didn't know, was there a job for the creative things I like to do?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's this pressure of like, well, you're graduating, you've got student loans, now you got to like support yourself. It's like,
right.
Well, how?
Right. Well, it's interesting because, you'd expect sort of you to have the confidence out of getting the degree to know exactly the potential job that you'd have as a result of the degree.
Yes.
But it's interesting if you're in that degree and it's such a wide field that it's like, well, where do I really end up anyways,
And it's so broad. And it's also like, it's a degree, it's a Bachelor of Applied Arts. Applied arts.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's up to you to apply them.
Yeah. It could be anything now.
And so you ultimately did with this, this first job at Treehouse?
Yes. So I remember interning.
That.
I was an intern there because in your last year of
during
school.
The degree. Okay.
Yeah. During your fourth year, you do an internship. And so this is like how this is what dates me, is Treehouse TV launched in 1998. And 1997, actually, fall of 1997. And at this time, that's when all these specialty channels were starting up. These, book TV, sex TV, space TV.
Right.
All these niche. And it was just like, in a way, it was the glory days of television.
Yes.
Because they were all owned by bigger companies, like by Chum, by, Rogers or whoever. And there were all these small new little stations that didn't have money to necessarily hire a lot of people, but they all needed someone very junior. They all needed a PA.
They all needed content.
Or a production coordinator. So, and they might have, like, a lot of these stations might have just a producer and then a coordinator. Right. Just because a lot of the shows, some of them they produced, a lot of them they bought. They re-aired and whatever. So it was just lucky timing. I was interning at Treehouse. The production coordinator was leaving as I was graduating. And so the producer was like, do you want to take Tracy's job? Because you're already familiar with the talent. So we produced the interstitial. So there were 2 hosts and a puppeteer. And I had known them from day one because I had been there. I started interning when they were casting. Yeah. So I was the most natural person to take on the role.
Perfect.
And also, like, let's be honest, no matter what they offer you in your first job, it doesn't matter what they offer you. It can be peanuts, but it's the most money you've ever made in your life because you've never had a full-time job, right? Like if you go through school working part-time, selling burgers, you're making a few $100 here, maybe at the end of the year, a few $1,000, like a few. So your first full-time job, it's like, I am so rich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My first job was like in fashion. And I remember I came back from school in Australia. And I moved to Toronto. I was subletting someone's apartment. It was like a room, the living room that was turned into an extra bedroom in a house where 6 people lived on Bathurst. But I had a salary. Yeah. And I was like,
you can make a plan. I
was like, I had to take 2 buses and a train to get there, but I was a city girl.
Yeah. And then you're like, they throw this number at you. So like my first job, they paid me $30,000 a year. And I was like, I knew I wasn't like rich, like I wasn't stupid because I was already paying rent and things like that. But, and I knew what groceries cost. And I knew that. And I was a real penny pincher because I also had student loans. So, but still in my mind, I'm like, well, that's the most money I've ever made. And then I still had to find an apartment that I could afford, which was under $600. So I ended up finding a basement apartment because I simply
that's all you could get.
Yes, and it had like popcorn ceilings that were very low because they weren't. And so every time I learned, I would have to I would crouch when I was getting dressed because otherwise I'd scrape my knuckles. So I used to scrape my knuckles all the time on the ceiling, or even stretching. Like if I woke up in the morning, you'd have to just learn to like crouch and then stretch. Like that's all you could do. But then, this is when you first learn about like the CRA and taxes. Like, you don't know.
Which is pathetic that you don't know that before.
Oh my God. When you get your first paycheck, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How do I take home $400 a week when I should be taking home $600? Like, just like suddenly it's like
mind blowing. And you're like, I'm going to get my first paycheck.
Yeah.
I'm going to be rich. Can't wait to buy myself something. And then you're like,
shocking. Yes. Like, just like that one, I was like, taxes?
Right.
Yeah. I think they actually do teach taxes in school now. I think there's
I hope so. But that's
Considering
really
you go through
upsetting.
all of those grades at university and end up looking at that first check being shocked.
blindsided.
So much money that they take.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they did teach it, and I just
No, I don't think
I don't recall them
teach
teaching
taxes
that.
to us.
I don't
They
think
did not. They definitely didn't
taxes
teach
were not
taxes.
part of the curriculum,
No.
which is mind-boggling because, like,
Totally.
I could give you the Pythagorean theorem, but I can't tell you how to do my damn tax.
And I mean, it's such a practical skill. Like, I think now that, like, you're right. I think there's more
do
focus on like financial literacy and like
that's
is
what they
such
call
a big.
it.
Like, can you read finance? Can you read numbers?
Yeah.
Because back then it was like I remember taking accounting in high school as a credit. And what that was that you could balance your own checkbook.
Yeah.
So I knew the debit column.
Right.
And
loved accounting in
what
grade
that
11.
meant.
That was my favorite course at all high school. I loved that accounting course.
I could
But they
see
never
you
taught
loving that.
They never taught you taxes.
Oh yeah, I mean that's an essential now. I think.
Yeah. And a real shocker when you get that first paycheck. Yikes. I mean, when you get most paychecks.
When you get most paychecks, yeah. Now,
Oh, great.
but then now I'm like self-employed.
No.
So then it's like now it's at the end of the year I owe you how much? Like it's that
exactly.
shocker and going like, wow, I just just like handing over
Take
the
my
money.
money.
Take it. Yeah. So
So you were working at that station, Treehouse, for how many years?
I was there full time for a year as a coordinator, and it was a really good learning experience for me. And I really, like production wise, I learned a lot because it was such a small team. So you do a little bit of everything. And I started writing a little bit when I would write some of the scripts for the interstitials, and they were hugely popular. The characters that we had there, and I don't know. I think I was just like not fulfilled. Like I don't know that I was like, I thought like, did I make a mistake? Is this what because a production coordinator is like, it's a lot of scheduling and organizing, right? So, I would label tapes and number tapes and just make sure dubs got done correctly and, things went to air correctly. So it was a lot of stuff that I was okay at. I'm not actually naturally the most organized person. And, sometimes I mixed up the numbers.
It's the right industry, just the wrong role.
Yeah, the role, and I was like, what do I do now? Right? Like I didn't know. And then I had no writing experience. So was I going to just be hired as a writer? Well, no, I wasn't. So I'd written a little bit there. And then I thought I would, I don't know what prompted me to leave because I don't know that I would have left without another job. Because again, I had student loans. I wasn't making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of experience. I needed something. But
I'm just gonna.
he just what?
Yeah, up and quit.
I'm just gonna leave. I feel like that's something kids would do now because they're bolder than I was.
Not back then.
No, and I was also a very terrified person. Like I was a terrified child. I was a terrified young adult, like people pleaser, like all those things.
Were your parents in Toronto at that point?
No. They're always in Halifax.
So that's a different thing. Like if if your parents are here in their own sort of settled home, you could quit and you got
back.
your parents.
yes, it's true.
You're not at home.
No, I'm just like
so
on my own.
So you got to make sure you do a complete Spider-Man to that. Like you got to attach the next web before you get out of the.
And I mean, true. And I don't even know. Like it's so funny now when I think about like, when people ask like, well, what are your advice? What are your tips? I'm like, it's really hard. Like when you start out, it's very much, or even if somebody moves to the city and they're experienced, right? And I'm like, it's who you know. Yes. And that's kind of a shitty thing.
Yes, and / how willing you are to make new relationships, to form new relationships.
Yeah. So in a lot of this industry, the creative industry, broadcast, and I know a lot of that would also now include like digital content and that sort of creative production industry. So much of it is your relationships, and it's who you know, and word of mouth referrals, right? Like I don't think I've typed up a resume in 2 decades, but I work. And a lot of it is now because it's like the gig economy. So it's short things that people don't necessarily write up a job posting for, right? Yeah. So at the time, so I was at Treehouse for a bit, and I went back to it actually because the producer I was working with, she ended up being asked to produce a kid show and had me write a script on spec, which is in the industry is when you write a script, they don't pay you for it unless they buy it from you. So in a way, it's almost like your application, right? Yeah, so you spend the time, you write a script for them, based on the Bible they give you. And if they're like, this fits us, then we pay for it. So there's time involved there. There's an investment, right?
Absolutely.
So I wrote a spec script. She liked it. And then I wrote half of the first season of that show, which is called We Three, WEE. It was a really adorable show. And that gave me the writing credits that I needed. Because when I went to university, I had wanted to work in children's TV and I wanted to write. I just didn't know what that really looked like because I didn't know what a writer's room looked like. I didn't know what a set looked like. I didn't know any of those things. I just knew that I liked kids' television and educational TV. So I ended up essentially freelancing with Treehouse, writing scripts. And then my next contract position was at TV Ontario. So working with on a teen show there as a chase producer and then as a field director. So it just like, you know, things just kind of happened. But there were lots of times in between where because the contracts are so short and you're making just enough money to pay your bills, but not to save up, right? Mm-hmm. You're not like, I'm scrolling it away for 6 months. You know, you're like, I barely, you know, bought my bus pass. Yeah, like just barely. So, but TVO was a great experience. And I applied on a whim when Omni, at that time was called CFMT, and they were launching a new station, and which was now it's called Omni 2. So they were looking for an on-air person, and I was actually going to go to Australia and take get my teaching degree. So I'd already accepted.
Oh, wow.
I paid a deposit. It was all going to work out perfectly because my contract at TV Ontario, which was about 6 months, was going to end right about a month before I would have moved to Australia to do my teaching degree. Because I thought I'd always loved the idea of being a teacher. And because my experience in the industry was that it was so sporadic, the work, and I was so stressed about it that I thought I need something that is more stable.
Yes.
Right? Like this freelance business, this contract gig thing where I was hired sometimes on a contract for 2 weeks.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, but you're stressed the whole time because you're like, those 2 weeks are coming up really quickly. And then how do you line up contracts so they work
don't
perfectly?
get paid in time?
Yeah, exactly. So I just I was like, I can't handle this. It's just
stressful.
It's so stressful.
Especially at that stage in your career.
When you're 22, 23.
It doesn't work, really.
No, and you're like, okay, well, the show's going to come back, but not for another 6 months.
What
do I do until then?
If you live at home.
It does. Exactly.
Yeah.
It
Other
works.
than that, at that age, at that part of your career, you don't have the relationships or the network to continue it going.
I mean, I had to pay $600 a month for my basement apartment, and I had student loan payments, and I had groceries, and I had my bus pass, and this.
There it goes.
And it's like
that's the whole salary.
Yeah, I can't not work for weeks or months at a time. So I was all set to go to Australia. I was like, this is great. I'm going to go to Australia. I'm going to have this experience of getting my teaching degree.
Where are you going to go in Australia? I went to university there. Wollongong.
Yeah, is that what it's? Okay, yes.
Wollongong.
Because it was a 1-year program.
Yeah,
and because I already had a degree, so that helped.
They have this they called it an articulation agreement. So when I had 3 years in college and I could do 1 year in university and then get my degree. That's why I went, because it was the furthest place away. And my family, I had family there, and I knew that I could turn my Conestoga College diploma into a degree in 1 year. So I have a degree, and technically I have a degree and a diploma from 4 years of school.
Look at that, doubling up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why you went there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little loophole, I feel.
Yeah, a loophole.
Well, I also managed to I got my schedule. I lived 2 hours from I ended up moving 2 hours from where my campus was. I lived at Bondi Beach, and but my schedule only had school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So the rest of the time I worked and I just partied. And also being at that time in my life, I needed to get a job within the first month or I wasn't going to finish. I was on a slow train that was, if I didn't catch this, it was going to run out by the end.
Yes. Yeah.
But good experience, but I think sounds like you made the right choice.
Well, I was so I'm going to do this because I don't think I want to do, I'm not sure about this career path, this industry I've chosen, which is so unpredictable. And truthfully, in my experience category, not very well paid, right? You can get by, but it's tough, right? So, but I remember someone who worked on another show, actually. She printed out the job posting, was like, we are looking for a full-time on-air host. You like this, and this, and you can do blah, 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 send in an audition tape. And so she left it on my desk when I got into work. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I've applied to stuff before and like, yeah, whatever, like on a whim.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just, have a friend help me make a VHS tape. On a very large camcorder.
Yeah, you're like, okay.
It takes a VHS. Like
it takes a VHS.
Yeah, okay.
And,
I had one of those.
And I sent it in. And then they asked me to come in for an audition. I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. So I'm like maybe 24 at this point. But I will say that I was always very young for my age. Like, I was a young 24. Like, now I meet kids who are like 22, 23. I'm like, how are you so smart? How are you
looks
so
like you have it together.
bright? Like, like they know their shit. They're really savvy. They're whatever. And I was.
Some of them are like that.
Some of them. And I was like, all through my 20s, you'd be like, this poor girl, we need to protect her. She's not, no, she would walk off with a stranger. Like, she would totally just like give somebody her bank account number and everything. Like, I was not, like, I was book smart, but I wasn't street smart in any way. But anyway,
what streets were you on?
I could have been on a lot of streets. I was in Beaverbank. Like, come on,
There's one street.
Yeah, there were like streets, and some of them didn't have names; they were just numbered. And they're all gravel. But anyway, so that they offered me the job, and it was the most shocking thing to me, to be honest. And then I was like, wow, because I was ready to start like this whole, like a very different life, right? Like, go and become a teacher.
You had your foot out.
Yeah, I was ready. I was like, this is going to be it, because I'd always loved the idea. Like, teaching was the one thing. It wasn't like it was just a, like a safety net thing. Like, I'd always loved the idea of teaching. I'd always loved little kids. It was probably something I thought I might do at some point, but then, the broadcasting degree was an opportunity, so I took it. I thought, well, maybe I can do, I didn't care what I was teaching so much. I was like, I feel good about this. This is going to fulfill this, desire that I've had since I was a kid. I wanted to like clap the blackboard brushes and stuff and clean them. Remember, all this, and they're going to write on the chalkboard. That's why I want to be a teacher, So I deferred actually my acceptance. I deferred it for a year. They kept the deposit and everything. So I thought, this TV thing, it's not going to work out. And then I'm going to go. I'm going to give them a year. Then I'm going to go. But then I never did. So then, that's.
Hopefully you got that deposit back.
I did. I think I got the deposit back. I'm pretty sure in year 2, I was like, so I'm not coming. I've got a job and it was like a full-time job.
At that point, it's like you just had savings. You'd had it for so long. And then
exactly. With no interest, but it's still good to get like a check of some kind. So that just like changed. That job at Omni really changed my career path, because I was really very set on this other direction. I was really ready for it, and then applying for that job kind of on a whim, just thinking like there's no shot in hell, but that it just worked out.
But also the wins at your back, because you got the script. They took your scripts. Like, you wrote the script. They loved the script.
Yeah.
And then you submit the demo.
Yeah.
And they hire you.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, how much, you're riding on some good confidence there. Both of the two things you're interested in doing, being a writer and, being on screen at that point.
Yeah.
Hit.
Yeah. But I mean, still, like, you have, what is it called? Imposter syndrome. Right?
Like, can I do this? Oh my God.
They're going to find out I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like,
You're just like walking in like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, the whole time it's like, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't feel like this is not good.
They're all going to be like, surprise.
In your career?
I was at Omni.
Oh, no. The feeling of imposter syndrome.
That's a good question. I would say that like it never really goes away, but I think you get to a point, or I got to a point where I was like, nah, F you. I can do this. And I think it comes to a point when you start to realize value. I think when you start out sometimes, or you're very ambitious about something that you do something because you're driven to do it. You want to do it. You want to prove that you can do it. And money, though important, is not the most important. And I'm not saying that right now in my career, money is the most important. Otherwise, I'd be in a different industry. But money and I would say compensation for my work is of greater value than it was a decade or 2 decades ago when I felt like I had to keep proving myself.
Yes.
And I'm at a point now where I'm not saying I don't have to prove myself, but I can say that like I've been doing this for so long. You can look at what I've done, XYZ, and you can check it out back there. I have proven myself. Therefore, if you want work of this quality or consistency or reliability, that's what you're paying for.
Right.
So less imposter syndrome now because, there's a confidence that comes from, no, I can do it.
And spending time in the industry and putting in the work.
Yes, exactly. And knowing the value of your work, which I think comes from, to be honest, like finding a group of people that are like-minded and with similar experience that you can compare notes with. I think, we work in an industry, and I still work mostly in television and in broadcasting. I do a little bit of writing, but most of it is TV. And as a freelancer now, so I'm self-employed. I don't, work for any broadcast or anything like that. And I think once you become your own employer, you can't rely on someone else to go, you know what? Let's give her a little raise.
Yeah.
Let's give her, she's a good worker. She's been doing a good job for a while. She makes coffee in the morning. She shuts the lights off when she leaves. Like, she's a really good little employer. Let's give her a little bump. Nobody gives me a bump unless I ask for the bump.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So now for me, that's when it flipped, when I had to actually ask for money, which is such an uncomfortable thing. Right.
Yeah, if you're in,
I agree. It's still a little bit uncomfortable.
The interesting thing though about it is, you're perceived as worth more.
Yes.
When you ask.
Yeah.
Because I know it, like on the flip side, if somebody asks firmly for an increase because I know my worth and I'm going to deliver this, and this is what makes it worth my time, it's like,
Oh, well, making a note to myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make a note, Case.
But you're right. Like, and I think women especially are afraid to ask for more because we don't want to seem, we don't want to seem greedy. We don't want to seem difficult. We don't want to lose out on work. That's a big thing that comes to, like, there is always a fear, like when I'm being firm.
That's the risk.
Yeah.
The risk is you lose out on work.
And you know what? I lose out on a lot of work.
Losing out on.
I lose out on a lot of work. And the more, I've said this to a few people when sometimes people like switch jobs, or there are people who are like in their 40s who are like, I think I'm going to go freelance, or I think I'm going to start my own, business or whatever. And sometimes that's by choice. Sometimes that's by circumstance. Right. And I always say to people that I make more money now by saying no more often.
This is exactly what Talia would say.
Yeah. And I have a feeling, Talia and I have talked about that.
Yes, probably.
Because we are in an industry where like there's no set rate in a way.
Right.
Like you can look at it as an average, right? You can go like, someone of my experience with my knowledge might charge, between this and this. But it's not like if you call a plumber to fix your toilet, and one plumber's like, it's $5 and the other one's like, it's $5,000. It doesn't swing that widely in a lot of industries. There's usually like an average, right? But in creative industries, it can be all over the place. So in a creative industry, it's like, but I find like that's the same with the arts. Like, why? Well, this painting is $10 at Value Village, but yet this painting is $10,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So who is it?
That definitely goes for like brand partnerships or like
exactly
that whole world of, brand stuff. Like you could do, I've done an Instagram post that's $200 and then one that's $1,500.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
She hasn't done the $200 one in years.
I learned from that one.
But I don't say yes to those ones anymore.
Yeah.
I just know that there's another better one coming down.
There's a better one coming down. And like, I think saying no is something that it's hard because you can't tell someone who's starting out to say no.
You can't say no
because in a way, when you're young and you're starting out, you say yes.
You
like
have
that's,
to
you
say
say yes. You say yes, you get the experience.
Yeah.
But then there's an element of like, when you get to a point where you're like, I've been doing this for a while, and I always say this to people, if you find that people are suddenly coming to you, people are asking you to do work, it's because they know you can. Because when you first start out, you're going to people. You're going like, hey, give me a shot. I can do that. Yes, I'll do that for you. And yep, that's no problem. I'll do it for free to see if you like it, and then you'll pay for it, like a spec script scenario,
Something
right? I'll do it for very little because I want to prove to you. I'll intern. I will shadow you. Like those are things that you say yes to. That's you searching out opportunities to prove yourself. But when people start coming to you, when people start contacting you and asking you to do the thing that you know you're good at, that's when you ask for money. And that's when you start saying, this is going to cost you.
Because you have value. And they're
Yes.
coming to you because they know that your work has value and that you're good at whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, they understand that your experience, it has value.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've probably made enough mistakes and understand where you've gone wrong in the past.
Yeah.
So you'll get it right with them.
Yeah.
And that's really the key that gives you the security to pay the higher price.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like asking what you're worth. Like, you don't have to be outrageous. I mean, you can be outrageous. And I think in some cases, you'll hear about a person who's like, wow, they got like, and I think in brand partnerships too, right? Because there are people who have like a lot of influence, a lot of status, and that's sort of a different world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if somebody's asking this and someone's paying it, that suddenly becomes their value, right?
Yes, exactly. So when did you when did you make the pivot out of being employed by a network and going out on your own and creating your own content? And did you do that over time? Did you crossfade into that?
No,
or
I
how
just
did you-
quit my job. Like
So relatively recently.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I did that by like just simply quitting. I didn't transition into anything. So that was 10 years ago, which feels like fairly recent, but it was 10 years ago.
Not adjust.
No,
thought it
when
was
I
like
meant just,
yesterday.
I meant like all I did was I just quit it. Like that's what I meant. Not like not recently.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I meant.
I was going to say,
like,
where have I been?
like,
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah. You just quit your
I
job.
didn't have a plan B, and I wasn't working on like an exit strategy. I
So
literally
what gave
just
you the-
quit it.
Okay,
like,
so walk us through the confidence to be able to do that, and what was happening there?
I would say, to be honest, it wasn't confidence; it was circumstance.
Okay.
So I think that's what causes people to change careers or life circumstances. So I was at Omni for many years, and Rogers and CTV bought Chum, and they split
Yes.
that up. So this was around 2008, 2009. And that was, unfortunately, that was also the recession. It was a really terrible time in television because when a lot of the bigger companies started buying up the smaller companies, there were just fewer employers, but there was also a lot of redundancy. So then a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of people left the industry because where were you going to go, right? Were these new stations starting up? No, they weren't. I was fortunate because I was within the Rogers family, and I still had my job, but there were a lot of people from Chum who were sort of in limbo. Like, am I going to CTV? Am I going to Rogers? What's happening to me? So they really had to cut the fat. And I was told, which I don't think anyone would do that now, but it was a very courteous thing to do, was I was told that my job was probably not going to be there for in a year. So, you don't normally get that kind of notice. So I was hosting the interstitials on Omni, and I had a counterpart, Lucy Zilio. And she was like, everyone knew Lucy Zilio.
Yeah.
She'd been on the air for so long, and she was a favorite. Like, people just like remember her so well. So we did the same thing because there were two channels. And I remember being told that because, times were tough, it was the recession, they'd spent so much money buying, all these properties, that there was probably not going to be a job for both of us within a year or so. And, but then I was offered the opportunity to look at jobs within City TV. So they bought City TV, and that meant moving out west. So it was a job. There was a job available in Edmonton that I could look at, and there was a job available in Winnipeg. And yes, so and I was like, I was in Toronto. I just bought a condo. So I was like, oh, I'm settling. This is my home, and I had it painted.
Wow. Wallpaper of.
Oh, it's a different one. That was a later one. Yeah. So this one was like, I bought a condo and I was happy with it. And I was like making it homey. And here I was hearing that, you're probably not going to have a job for long unless you take one of these other jobs, right? So I took a job in Winnipeg, and it was to host and produce breakfast television in Winnipeg.
Okay.
So it was actually a great opportunity for me because I did not have live TV experience. Everything we did was taped, and there was no one in Toronto who was going to necessarily give me that opportunity because Toronto's the biggest market in Canada. This is not really where people take a lot of risks, right?
Right.
So you go and you get your experience in a small market, and you come back maybe and do that. So I went out to Winnipeg, and it was a 2-year contract. And as soon as the 2 years were up, I'm like, so is there anything back in Toronto for me? And they were like, no, but like, we hope you'll stick with the company, and maybe you could stay there for a little while longer if something comes up. But there was just nothing there. So I could have stayed.
Your condo here?
I rented it out because I would have lost so much to sell it. So I rented it out. So at least it took care of itself.
Yes.
And that's all I needed it to do. And Winnipeg was a really, it was a good experience. It was a tough experience. It's hard to, they say it's a dry cold, and once you're there, you actually understand what that means. Like, is a dry cold.
Is it ever a wet cold at minus 15?
Not like a damp.
No, but coming from Nova Scotia is wet cold.
It's like a damp.
But it's not a wet minus 20. No. There's no such thing.
No, it's just damp, right? Like the snow was heavy in Nova Scotia, but out in Winnipeg, you're like, this stuff is light as air, Yeah. Like, I'm like, this is the difference. Now I understand when people say, but it's a dry cold. I'm like, yes, I get it now. But it was hard. Being there was hard. It was very, very hard for me. But I did meet some great people, and it was in the end because we were putting on a 3-hour morning show every single day with almost no crew, no money. And expected to turn it around. In a way, because we were a smaller market, we weren't like head office. Toronto was not breathing down our necks. Like they were watching, but they were really focused on fixing the big markets first.
It wasn't a big enough problem for them.
Yeah, as long as it wasn't a big problem.
They kept their eye on it, and they kept, we lost people, and there wasn't a lot of money for anything. But in a way, it meant that we just kind of had this. Some freedom to be very, very creative where we could. And it's also really hard to move to a new place in your 30s and have to make new friends, to completely transplant yourself somewhere where, to be honest, they don't like you because you're from Toronto.
Right.
So I was already very well disliked before I arrived.
Right. This time you were of drinking age. Though.
Yes, I was of drinking age. But I had to get up at 3 a.m, so I was in bed at 8.
You weren't going anywhere.
I was in bed at 8. So it was. They were very pivotal years in my life. There were 2 years, and in many ways, it felt fast and it felt really long at the same time. But when that contract ended, that's when I was done. Like I've been someone who needed stability because I was like, I've got a mortgage still, like if my tenants left, I still need to pay for that. Like I need a place to live. I've got bills, all of this. And when they were basically like, we would like you to stay there and we'll give you another 3-year contract. I was like, I don't want 3 years. And this was the first time in my life that someone had said, what will it cost?
Oh.
So what will it cost for you to stay? And I was like, oh, that's never happened to me.
Right.
And I'm not saying they had like tons of money.
No.
Like I was making under 6 figures. But
It happens more often if you're willing to go to places like Winnipeg or
so it
Fort
wasn't
McMurray. You'd be surprised how often it happens in those places.
And those were not high salary places, right? So, and those are the years when people would be like, well, we gave you a, was it cost of inflation raise, which would be like a 2% or something. Yeah. So I kind of threw out a random number, which was like not huge, but compared to what I was making was like a big jump. Like I went up by tens of thousands of dollars, basically. So I think I like quoted something that was like $60,000 and like more. And it was like, well, that's, so we did the whole, like, I quoted up here and I'm down here and we're trying to like find this little like middle ground, whatever. And it went back and forth a few times. And then I just got frustrated. Like I realized, like, as much as I loved working in TV, just working in TV wasn't what made me happy. Like it wasn't like being on TV is not, I can take it or leave it. Like I want to do something. I want to do content that I enjoy, however that content is shared. So if it was writing, then that would make me happy. And maybe I lost some of the luster of like being on TV for the sake of being on TV. It was just, that wasn't doing it for me. No, really wasn't doing it for me. And I think and having that, not an ultimatum, but I had a deadline to make a decision,
right? So
right?
You had a heck of a fork in the road.
Yes.
It was a definite
So
fork.
it's not like when you're at a job and you're like, maybe I want to do this or maybe I don't. You can just kind of like buy some time. I didn't have time to buy. I needed to figure that out. So as we went back and forth a few times on numbers, I didn't think they would jump because they came back very, a bit low. It's what they're supposed to do. And as we got closer and closer to this like magical number that I had asked, a friend of mine who worked within the company said, you better be careful that you're not bluffing, because if they give you what you want, you have to take it. And I was like, okay, yeah, because I never thought they would, right? And we were at a point where it was getting close.
Right, like they could have come
you're
back
like,
with your...
Yeah, I was like, I didn't think this was going...
You're like, oh, shit, now we actually have to do it.
They would have, it was going to, because they didn't want to do this again, right? So they're like, we're not going to do this year-long contract.
That's the worst if you like try and set the rate high enough so that they won't book you because you don't want to do it. And they're booking, you're like, fuck.
You're like, oh, and I did that even with like sponsored content now, which is kind of different. It's a one-off where you're like, I don't really want to post about that. Oh yeah, I want $5,000, and then it's like, well, yeah, we have close to that. You're like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do now? But anyway, so that whole experience. Plus, I was homesick, so I think ultimately, if it had been that job, those circumstances, but in Toronto, I would have written it out. Even if I was like, oh, I don't really feel challenged, or I don't feel there's a lot of room to grow, I would have kept it if I was in Toronto, because it would have been a job, right? I was not delusional. I wasn't like, oh, all these people are going to pick me up. No, I needed a job. But I was in a city that I didn't have any attachment to. My family was far away. My friends, were far away. So it was actually much easier because of that, because it was literally, I was there just for a job and for a job that no longer fulfilled me. So it was quite easy to walk away. And it sounded ridiculous to people when I said, oh, I'm leaving. Like, oh, where are you going to? And I try to be careful now when people say that they're leaving something or they're making a change, not to make the assumption that there is a bigger and better, because it can be hard on that person to have to say there is no bigger and better. Yeah. I'm just leaving.
Right.
So, because we assume that, right? Like, oh, you've left your job, or you did this, or yes. And I try to catch myself, because it is an automatic reaction. Or when someone says, I'm taking time off, it's like, ooh, but you know what? You don't know why they're taking time off. Yeah. Right? There's a lot of reasons for taking time off that are not to be celebrated.
Throw a table by.
Yeah. So it was really hard to say to people, like, I chose to be unemployed.
Right.
Like, it's a bit of humble pie, right? Like, and it's like, what, you don't have a job lined up? I'm like, nope, I don't. No. I have no job lined up.
This is 2011, 2010.
This is 2011. Yeah. So, But I've been saving, like I saved money. I mean, I made like an okay salary for a single person living in a smaller city. That I kind of, and also because I went to bed at 8, I never spent money. But like,
what did you do? Like, you're still renting out the place in Toronto.
Yeah.
So are they month to month at that point? Are you able to move back in there?
They are. Well, here was the thing. I knew I couldn't move back into that place because it cost me too much.
Right.
I
it was
could
too expensive.
not.
You're better off letting them cover that place.
So
and keep it.
yeah, they're going to hold it. It was a 2-bedroom place. But for me to come back, I was going to have to be like a penny pincher.
Yeah.
And so as long as it was for me at that time, much too risky. So it was better for like to have that just like taken care of and then have me figure out like, what the hell am I going to do now? So I actually took a few months off and I traveled a bit. I went to Australia. So I finally went, but I never went to go to school.
I mean,
I had a friend.
Did you go to Wollongong?
I did
No, don't go.
But I had a friend who moved there for work, and she always said to me, she used to travel a lot for work. So she lived in Italy for a year. She was like all over the world, and she always said, wherever I am, you have a place to stay. And it was a beautiful invitation.
Very sweet.
It's very sweet,
golden
isn't it?
ticket right there.
Yeah. And even when I was in Winnipeg, as much as like I worked with some wonderful people and I made some beautiful friends, and they're the ones who carried me through those 2 years, but they were challenging. The schedule was also challenging. And there were times when I was like, I don't think this is what I wanted. I don't know. I don't think this is it. And she would always say, if you need to leave, you can stay with me. She always gave me like, and we don't always have that landing pad. And I mean, like Nelson, like you said, if my parents were here, I could go home,
Absolutely.
right? I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was always her invitation, right? Wherever I am, you have a place. Not forever.
Yeah. Don't stay too long.
Like, whatever to like gather yourself and what have you. So I went and visited my parents for a little bit, and I went to Australia, and then I moved back to Toronto, and I started freelancing, and it was probably the worst year of my life, like employment wise, because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I didn't know I'd been steadily employed for 10 years by a network. I had benefits. I got a check every 2 weeks. It was enough that I covered my bills and could save a little bit, right? Like, and suddenly I'm like, I'm back, bitches.
Right. And you're in an eat what you kill situation.
I'm back in Toronto.
The guy who killed it, tossing you some of it.
Yeah. And like people didn't know I was available, right? Because everyone know me to be employed by a station for so long. So it's like, well, what are you doing now? I don't know.
Hire me, somebody
for a thing, whatever. And that was a year that I learned a lot that year. That was a very, very stressful year. So this is 2012. I made less in 1 year than I did in my first year at Treehouse, where I was paid $30,000.
Right.
And I say that because, and I'm not embarrassed. It's like I am, but I'm not really to say that, because starting to freelance after working for like 15 years in the industry, where I had been steadily employed most of the time by a network, and then suddenly going on my own was not easy. And so it's hard to like, I was starting new.
Yes. It's a different beast.
Yeah. And I was getting like, and things had also changed so much. People were like, freelancing was suddenly more of a thing. It wasn't a thing when I started, working. People did like year-long contracts or like 6 months, like for a show. And then suddenly this was an industry where like, it was really like all over the place.
Yeah,
like,
a lot more gigs.
Yes. And also the rates for writing, because I used to write, and the rates had gone down by 80% for writing. Like it was, I'm like, what do you mean it's not $1 a word? Like, I'm sorry, but your girl gets $1 a word.
Yeah.
What do you mean it's $50 for that whole story?
Yeah.
Right? But that's also when I started working, when I say the internet wasn't a thing, like digital content wasn't a thing.
No.
And then when I came back in 2012 and people were reading a lot of, like blog sites or news sites that were lived like digitally, they were not necessarily, big money makers for anyone. No. So they were, many cases, like $50, $100, even print. I was still doing some print stuff. And the rates of that were less than what I had been making 15 years earlier.
Right.
So that was like, what a wake-up call that was.
Yeah, you're like, okay.
I thought rates would go up.
Yeah.
So when does food start creeping into all
Oh, my God. Jeez.
Your love of food.
Around now, I guess.
You know what? It was around the time when I was still in Winnipeg. That free paper that used to get called Metro? The one that used to paper?
Oh, yeah.
So they were launching in Winnipeg, and they always had a food columnist in each city. And through someone I knew who was like, do you want to like meet with like the editor or whatever? So I did their food column in Winnipeg. And that was just a side thing. Honestly, it paid me $75. It was like not a lot of work. I just highlighted different local restaurants each week. I enjoyed doing it. It was something that I like actually did genuinely like meeting these business owners.
Yeah.
And I watched a lot of Food Network. Mm-hmm. Like even when I was at Omni, the like TV in my office. Era. Yeah, like Anna Olsen, Giada, even when like who did I just blank on for a second?
Iron Chef, the classic Iron Chef was there.
This was like even like
David Rocco downstairs. He had a show for
Yes, yeah. And this was like pre-cooking competition. It was just cooking shows.
This is pre-cooking competition.
This is just like straight up like dump and stir.
Emerald style.
They just like they're actually making. And when I was at Omni for 7 years, dump and stir. Yeah. But when I was at Omni for 7 years, I had a TV in my office, and typically you watch the station you work at, but it was always on Food Network. I watched Food Network all day for years, and then at home I would watch Food Network, and I'd get home from work at from BT, and I'd be I was just tired. I was a zombie because of the hours, and I would just watch Food Network. I just love I loved
relaxing,
it.
Really.
It is relaxing. I didn't necessarily make it like the things they were, cooking. But I'd always had a love for food. And then I realized that a lot of my knowledge came from just my brother and I being a kid and like running around the farmer's market because my parents were vendors there. Right. So we just had a little bit of this background that you don't pinpoint it necessarily. But I'm like, oh yeah, like I know that. Or this reminds me of whatever. And when I moved back, it just, I think like little things come about that were related to food. And I think when you really do care about something and you're passionate about something, it becomes the thing that you are known for, right? So, because if you said to me, if I said to you like, oh no, I'm into cars, and like, you're not into cars. Like that's, you've never talked about cars. Yeah, you've never talked about cars. You never posted about cars. Yeah. Nothing about you has shown any interest in cars.
That's like when Nelson asked me about food. I was like, no, I love food and cooking, but it's the thing that I don't post because it's my like break from internet. Mm-hmm. It's my break. One thing I do love that I got, a recipe I got from you, is your granola recipe. During pandemic times, we were living at the cottage, and I made your granola. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, good. I'm glad I make it all the time too, because it's so easy,
delicious, and it's so easy.
Yeah, it's on the Kits website.
Got that bookmarked.
Yeah. It is so easy. I'm glad you make it. People, I'll get like sometimes some random comments about people making it, and it makes me happy because I'm like, just things should just be easy and simple, and I'm more than, I love getting that sort of feedback. But I mean, I guess like Nelson, when it comes to food, it was just, it had slowly become more of a passion of mine, probably at a time when I didn't really know, like I liked a lot of things because I was doing lifestyle TV. So you do kind of naturally like things. I liked a little bit of DIY. I liked a little bit of fashion. I liked a little bit of skincare. I liked a little bit of like fitness. And
all the things.
I like all the things. But which one was I spending all of my time wanting to know more about? And I would get up early on weekends. I got up early anyway, but and I go to the farmer's market like every week, and I would just buy so much more shit than I would ever cook. And that to me was like what I enjoyed, what I found relaxing. And so just by evolution, it became more, I think I was willing to share more of that interest. I think I just was able to do that versus, having a little bit of an interest and not really sharing it. And then things just kind of like came my way because of that. And I think also having done the food column was a good little start.
Yeah.
It made people aware that I, did some food stuff. No one knew my background in terms of my family and food. Like that was just never a thing. Like that never came about. Like there was no reason for it too in those early years of me doing like food and food media. I never made the connection of the two. It wasn't until people started asking a little bit more, and then even like the media in Halifax would ask about my parents. That I thought like, my God, I've actually grown up in a very natural kind of hippie food environment my entire life, but sort of just dismissed it because it was also just not that was nothing glamorous about what my parents did. They didn't want us to be in the business anyway, right? But that was just like that was also the childhood that we knew, and so suddenly I'm like, you know what, my brother and I, we grew up at the farmers market. Like we grew up eating like what was local and what was seasonal, before people were making big deals about that in stories or on shows. It was just like kind of what we did. So that connection I really didn't make for a very long time.
So now, like 2011, 2012, you're now freelance.
And poor. I was so poor in 2012.
So walk me through some of the initial paid food related stuff.
Oh, some of it was shit. I was paid so little for some stuff.
Like writing?
Writing, yeah, because like I was like, okay, what is the skill that I have that I can get work, from? And I've been writing. I mean, I'd written TV shows. And I actually wrote some animation for a preschool show, which I love doing because it is not hard for someone to draw me back to preschool audience. Like I would write for preschool any day. Like it is for me a fascinating age, and you will soon learn that, Nelson. Like when they're like 2 and 3, it's magical.
I bet.
And so my background in kids TV, my background in children's writing and educational TV was always a thing that I had, right? Like, so I had that skill, but then it was also like, I needed to meet people who were hiring writers. I didn't know anyone who was hiring. Like, I don't know. I had been employed as a on-air host and producer for so many years. I didn't need to network writing, you know? So it was through my old boss at Treehouse that she was suddenly like in a high position at Nelvana. And I said, Jamie, I don't know if you know any writing gigs. Like I'm really rusty. It's been a decade, but like I'm super rusty and I'm a bit high risk, like because I haven't done it in so long.
I'll just lay it
and but I hope for most people that you will always have one or two people in your life that think you're the fucking shit, no matter if they haven't worked with you in a decade or more. Like we all need someone in our lives who really has unlimited confidence in you. And also in that vein, you should be that for someone else. You should be for someone else who's maybe younger or that you're mentoring, that person who always reminds them, you fucking got this. And I will put my name on the line for you with someone else. I'm going to refer you for shit. I'm going to get you to where you want to be. I think we all should be that person too. And so my first boss, Jamie, at Treehouse TV, she was like a young producer, a young mom. And through the years, because now we're going back to 97 when I was an intern, we are still in touch, not a lot anymore. But when I think about it, she's gotten me so many of my jobs through the years because she was a reference. Even when I applied for my first on-air job at Omni, which was for, a big Toronto TV station where I didn't have the experience, they called her as a reference. And I know she got me the job because the HR woman, when we spoke on the phone, she said, so I spoke to Jamie, like your old boss, and she told me I would be a fool if I didn't hire you. And I'm like, she's just joking. That's just her way of talking. So when I moved back and I hadn't been writing in over a decade, I had not written a kid's show in a decade. And she's like, I've got a production and I'm going to contact the head writer and I'm going to talk to him. I'm like, okay, like this is a big favor. This is her reputation, right? So I met with him and he's like, you haven't written animation before. I'm like, no, I'm clearly not supposed to be here because you want an animation writer. Like that's what you want. You want someone to write animation who's written animation. Like you're not here to give somebody her experience, right? Yeah. And I was like, no. And he's like, so, but you've written for Jamie. I'm like, yeah, it's a long time ago, but yes, I have. And he said, well, we'll get you to write a script. She told me I'd be an idiot if I didn't hire you. I'm like, oh, that's just Jamie. And I did. I wrote for the show, and it was honestly, I owe her she had the confidence in me that I never had in myself, but she also had the balls to tell people when she was in a position to do so, you give this girl a shot, and you won't be sorry. Mm-hmm. So she did that for me, and then because of that. I didn't want to let her down. Right. I was terrified, right? Because I'm like, she's a big person. She's in charge of that show and this and whatever. And like, dare I not fuck up this because she did this for me, right? So, that I don't even know what the original question was that you asked me. But
it was back to getting into food.
Yeah. Now you're a freelancer. Yeah. And so this job that you just mentioned, this is like a bit of a longer lead contract.
The animation?
Yes.
What? Oh, no, that was just per script. So you get paid per script. Okay. Yeah, you deliver your script and then, then you invoice.
Oh, okay. How many scripts did you end up doing?
You know what? They were going to get me to do a bunch of scripts. I ended up writing 2 because there was a tax credit situation where I had lived in Winnipeg and not in Ontario. So they didn't qualify for the tax
they're like, just kidding.
They hired me. Oh. So the original plan, I was gutted, but it was like no one's fault. I was originally supposed to write several scripts that season. But then because they could not get the tax credit for hiring me, because you had to be I don't know, like if you ever had this, but you had to be an Ontario resident the calendar year before, and I was not. So I did 2, and then again, you know what? Like, oh God, 6 years later, she hired me for another show. I mean, she's like, I need you. I got a show. I'm like, okay, all right, well, let's do it.
So fast forward to 2022.
Yeah.
And you're bringing out your own line of sauces.
Well, we've got one. Okay. So, there's a local company called Zing. Their website is cookwithzing.com. They were honestly, I think a pandemic project. Like it's 3 young friends that I've never met, but I tried their product called Sacha-ish. It's a chili oil condiment. Okay. And they also had like a curry garlic spiced spread called Mogambo. And I was okay, went online. And, during the pandemic, we were all stuck cooking for ourselves. And I was just like buying things online because what else was there to do? And I became like such a fan I was like, I love this stuff. So, you just post it on Instagram because you like it. You tell people about it. You buy it for other people. And because I was still working in TV now, mostly as a food and lifestyle person, I'm able to bring things I like to a larger audience, right? So I wrote a story about them for the Toronto Star. Like I pitched an editor. I was like, hey, look, I love this. I fucking love this chili oil. And you know what? As far as I know, they're 3 young kids and they seem really nice. But maybe we do a story on them. Like, okay, great. And that got them they've been written about by other people like Toronto Life and CBC and all of that. So they were getting buzz locally, which was great. On BT and stuff, I was able to put them on. And we just you strike up a bit of an online friendship because I was always buying it. Like I was buying it, I was posting about it, I was sending it to people. And it came about very naturally. They do some chef collaborations for different products. And just like not even a year ago, I don't think, we were just kind of on DM, myself and Janine. And I think we're actually talking about ice cream. And it's just like, well, if you ever wanted to, work on your own condiment, I'm like, yes.
Yes, right now.
Yes. And so we did. So it was in the test kitchen phase very recently. And now it's available for pre-order online. So just also to give them an idea of how much to make and then, send it out. So it's a Toronto company. There are 3 lovely people. I'll also just mention they're BIPOC owned. And they've got they have really interesting backgrounds in like startups and tech. And I'm just like fascinated because I'm like, I don't understand this. They're so organized. They know, like, they look at data and analytics, and they're just like, they're so smart. And I'm like, okay, guys, like, let me just give you my flavor notes.
Did you know exactly what you wanted to do, condiment-wise, right at the so?
No, because there's so much out there that I love. But also, like, there's so much out there that I love. Like, I have 1,000 mustards and chili sauces and oils and spreads in my fridge. And it wasn't like I was going, we're really missing a whatever. Because I'm like, oh, there's just so much great stuff. When we worked out, like, what kind, they were very good in terms of, like, getting me to focus. So I was like, well, you know, what kind of content do you want? Yeah. What is important to you? What flavors do you like? What reminds you of childhood? Like, all of these, like, thought starters to come up with something that is actually just more meaningful. Good questions. Right?
Yeah.
So, because otherwise I could be... otherwise, I could be like, I got a new ketchup. I got a new jam. Like, there could be so many things. And all those could be really great. But then it was like, okay, well, what is it that I want a pantry shortcut to do? And that's what they call all of their products. It's a pantry shortcut. It's something that can just add a boost of flavor, that can, like, change up your veggies, your protein, your carbs with very little effort. Like, there shouldn't, you can just spoon most of their products onto eggs, onto your steak, onto your veggies in a stir fry, and it just adds flavor. It's not you chopping a million things and mixing ingredients and whatever. So we came up one called Sacha-ish. And it's also in line with their Hakka-ish, because what they're very careful about doing is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not saying that this is a product true to this culture, this country, this whatever. It is, that's where the ish part comes in, right? So it is it's inspired by, flavors that I grew up with, but also, like, modernized with other Southeast Asian flavors and, putting a little twist on it. So it's inspired by a traditional Taiwanese barbecue sauce, which is called Bull's Head Barbecue, which when you go to have hot pot or anything like that, it's definitely there. So it was definitely our, like, hot pot dipping sauce. So I say inspired by, and you take that very loosely because that one has some seafood in it, whereas the one we created is vegan. Oh, nice. And the one we created also has, like, miso in it, and that's not traditional of, the Taiwanese barbecue sauce. But in terms of texture, a bit of flavor, and how you might use it, that's what it's inspired by. So, my parents, my brother and I sitting around having hot pot, and that tin of what I didn't know what it was like Bull's Head barbecue sauce. Yeah. And that was always there, but it's great for your marinades, your stir fries, and what have you. So we do have
a bottle here.
And I'm going to try it.
Okay. And because it has something that could kill Nelson in it, we will not give it to him.
Nelson's not going to try it.
Yeah, because it has sesame. So I didn't even crack the jar.
It's kind of spicy.
It's a little bit, are you okay with heat?
I love a good spice.
Okay, because some people... It's got a little kick. So, like, you wouldn't typically eat it on its own, for example, but I do want you to try it.
Some on it.
But do you you know what?
A knife
or something I can stir it up.
Okay, here. You can put it on.
Okay.
And I'll...
Just because it separates a little bit. So you always want to stir it up before you try it. And I'm really proud of the product because they've done an amazing job with the variations as we've gone through testing it. And I just think that it makes a great addition to your holiday entertaining. Also as a great gift because for a couple of reasons. Even if you don't buy this product, their other ones are like they're Toronto made. They're local. Yeah. It's a local company that you're supporting. And I just love giving unique food gifts. That's my favorite things to give somebody a jar, even if it's like a jar of honey that's local, like those sorts of things.
Those are my favorite kind of food gifts. I love when someone comes to the cottage.
And it's a talkable item. It's like, you know what? This is a company that just started, or a history of the ingredients, whatever. Like, Kat, I'm just going to tell you that this is
that a lot?
It's a little bit of heat, but you told me that you can handle heat.
All of a sudden, I'm going to get called out now. Hey.
Like it's not, I would say that you don't use it as a spread the way that I have typically, but I've done that for you just to give you like a little flavor of it, but like it's got a lot of umami.
Mommy.
and a little bit of heat. And it has,
Oh, yeah. Nice.
but
I can see myself cooking with this.
yeah, I put it like, I mean, in just trying to eat more veggies, I just stir fry. Like I'll just like stir fry a tablespoon of this with some veggies. I love it on tofu. I added a bit, I was making turkey burgers. So I had a pound of turkey and I just added like a spoonful of that into it, mixed it up and grilled it. So it really is meant to just make life easier. And that's why we call it a pantry shortcut or like a flavor booster, because you don't have to add a million other things to it. We've had some chefs test it out as well to give us feedback.
I did a little bit of chicken. So I'm imagining
It was a sandwich. It's a mini sandwich. And exactly like as a spread, it's great. A lot of the feedback we got from chefs was that they just loved it on steak. They loved it on, but veggies and stir fries. And that was part of the reason we wanted to make it vegan, is so that it adds flavor to whatever you want to cook. Eggs. It's beautiful with eggs, for example. Yeah. So all of the like really simple foods that you might have at home and you're like, I just need to make this taste good.
It looks exactly what, it looks that it'll do exactly that.
Yeah.
It's so delicious.
Without a lot of effort. Like that's the key. And so really excited. So it's online for pre-order, and we really wanted to get it out before the holiday so that people could have it for themselves for easy entertaining purposes. And as a gift as well. So even like a teaspoon of that mixed into some hummus or labneh, for example, just to get right, and then have it as a dip. So there's like endless ways to use it, and I'm really proud of it. And
we're really excited for you.
Good. Thanks.
Oh my God, it's so good. I will definitely be pre-ordering. I will also, as I'm chewing, because I took a little bit more before I gave the jar back. But we will also include the link in the show notes, so anyone who's listening can pre-order this or another one of their products. Definitely, as you mentioned, great for gifts for friends to have at your house, holiday dining, perfect timing.
Yeah.
Rhyming.
You're rhyming.
Like we're making puns with the name. We're like, it's such a great gift.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely give my 2 thumbs up on it.
Thank you.
Awesome case.
And Nelson would too.
I would too.
Could try it.
If I could try it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would, because I like hot chili stuff like that.
Oh,
yeah, we
good,
haven't done a
good.
taste test on this is our first time.
Yeah.
Doing a taste test.
We thought of doing a bit of a teppanyaki grill type episode with one of the chefs.
That'd be amazing.
It'd be great. But we were once here after the show eating, and we just heard like into the mics because we listened to it back. I was like, maybe it's not the best
Not
idea.
ideal, is it?
No, maybe on a TV show where it's like a little more.
And maybe like where you're not close to smoke detectors and stuff,
So you've done a lot of traveling and eating.
Yeah.
Some of your top 3 craveable dishes in different places around the world.
Oh boy.
You're like, I'd love to be there right now to get this.
I was just in Parma, Italy, and I don't know anyone who doesn't like Italian food.
It's a
I mean, really, who
doesn't like Italian food?
Yes. So I'll think to something that was really recent. I was in a dairy where they make Parmigiano Reggiano.
Oh yeah,
and that was such a cool experience. And to be able to try the different age varieties there at the dairy was pretty phenomenal. And then we also, when we went out to eat at restaurants, we would eat at restaurants where they would feature the parm like in different ways. And like we had what's it called, gnocco fritto, which is fried bread, and it's just this like it's a fairly recent Instagram post of mine, and it just says fried dough pillow, airy, and you can just like it's warm, hot out of the fryer, and light as air, flaky, and just a little bit of prosciutto, a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano or other cheese that you like, and it creates this like little perfect pocket.
It sounds like you could put anything on it.
Yes, basically. And it's just
I
like
want to
absolutely
crawl
delicious.
inside this little pocket. It sounds so good.
Absolutely delicious. And I mean, I'm drawing a bit of a blank. I haven't done too much international travel because of the pandemic. So that would probably be like the main one. But I also love, I'm just trying to think of some of the stuff I had. I'll get back to Taiwan at some point. It's been many, many years, but like the street food there,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, and even just something.
I watch Taiwanese street food on YouTube.
Yeah,
and stuff, and I could never do it because I'm allergic to like sesame.
And there's so many things. Yes.
Okay, so like I know I'd never be able to do it, but I love watching street food videos of different cities. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Love it.
And what they can do with a cart is amazing. Yeah.
Right? Like how fresh it is. Like it's all fresh.
Like you're like, this is a cart or just like a propane burner.
Yeah,
and they're just creating the most amazing food out of there. So I mean, like that's definitely like an amazing, it's such a cool experience. And then I just think of like, okay, so I was in Mexico earlier this year. That was like my first trip after like COVID. And we just go and we eat at these like little local spots. So we go off the main strip. Yeah. And just having like freshly grilled, like just having like the grilled fish, a beautiful like ceviche, like food that is truly simple. Like it's not fussy. It's not foams and 80 different ingredients, as much as that can be fun and delicious to eat. Yeah. That's usually not, everyday food for people. But like the fact that you like a beautifully grilled fish with a little bit of like the smoke from the grill and, squeeze a fresh lime and a bit of sea salt, like,
simple.
It's the best, right? Same with ceviche, fresh seafood, a little bit of lime, some onion, what have you. And it can just be like so transformative. Like, why don't I eat this every day?
Yeah, totally.
Pei, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. It was really fun to chat with both of you.
Thank you. So many good stories.
Awesome stories. And I'm so excited to see the success of this sauce. I think it's going to be fantastic. And, I'm excited to see what is in store for you in the future.
Thanks. Me too. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode with Pei Chen. Check out her work and recipes at peichen.com. We dropped a link in the show notes to pre-order her new pantry shortcut. It is spicy and delicious.
Find more episodes of our podcast at castofcreators.com. Subscribe on YouTube or listen to your favorite podcast platform.